Yo, yo, yo. So I'm going through this little journey of trying to put together a video on Malcolm X, man, because I'm learning so much um, about who he was, and I started reading this book right here because I never finished it. I always had this book, but I never finished it, and I still haven't finished it. I still haven't gotten far in it, and it's only because I was blown away from the first chapter alone. Like, the foreword is from his daughter Atala. This version of the book right here with this cover has a foreword by his daughter named Atala, his oldest daughter, matter of fact. So this foreword is by Atala right here, and you have to read the foreword. I know most people who buy books, they don't really read the foreword. They just start with chapter 1, but you have to read, the foreword, because it gives you so much to think about, and stuff you didn't even know. Like, I didn't even know that how long it took to make the Malcolm X movie. Because I think I bought the movie on DVD and iTunes, so I have the Malcolm X, story, and I've seen the movie like so many times because I was born in 1989, and I think the Malcolm X movie came out in 91, 92, and so I didn't know that the first script was written by Baldwin, James Baldwin, and so. Yeah, I learned that from reading the foreword, that it was that Malcolm X died in February 21st, 1965, and I think this book came out after his death, so he never saw this book get published. And so once the book came out, then a friend of Malcolm actually wanted to make a movie. So they had this movie in mind since 1965, and it didn't come out until the early 90s, okay? And so I'm like blown away by that. And so, it went through a many of directors, a many of writers and everything. And so when Spike Lee got it, he actually decided to keep the Baldwin script. And so I went on Spike Lee's website, and I actually got the actual, it's called The Trials and Tribulation of Making the Malcolm X movie, which I'm so... Like, that's actually going to be on my reading list this year. So after I finish reading the book that I'm currently reading, I don't even want to tell you what book I'm reading right now, but once I finish reading that, I want to go back to finish reading this, and then I'm going to read the Spike Lee, the making of Malcolm X movie. And I'm going to make a video about that and what I've learned from that. And because I actually want to talk about Malcolm X's foundation, his parents, his father, his mother, and how much that story just blew me away, and how, it was so sad when I got to the end of chapter 1. I'm like, chapter 1 is a book in itself. Like, it's so crazy. You get what I'm saying? Like his father was literally like almost 60 years old when he was killed. You get what I'm saying? Malcolm X's father was like 59 when he was killed. He was in his 50s. And his mother was 34. Okay? So his mother's in her 30s. And she's left with 7 kids. And she gets one, life insurance payment, but she's not able to get the other because they claimed that Malcolm X's father had killed himself. And she's like, how the fuck could he kill himself when he was laid across train tracks? You mean to tell me he laid his... Like, you actually see that in the movie. Like, it shows you that in the movie. But it doesn't give you context of basically about how his... Like, you gotta picture this world of this 34-year-old woman being left with 7 children. And the primary breadwinner who was there to help her with all of these kids has been killed. And this is and he was killed in 1931. This is the time of the Great Depression. Great Depression in 1929. And so FDR had not come into office until 1933, where he was able to put these New Deal policies together to help people. And what did those policies even do for widowed women or women like Malcolm X's mom, who was actually a woman from Grenada who had a white father? Like, she passed for white. She was very fair complected. And back then, when she was trying to find work to feed herself and her 7 children, she was, they didn't want black women in their houses, and they didn't even know she was, she's in these white people houses cleaning, washing dishes, washing clothes, and they're not knowing she's a black woman. And until her kids start looking for her, and they see these black kids coming for their mom, and they're like, "You're a black woman?" And they kick her out, and she just has this breakdown. You get what I'm saying? And she's trying to date, and pretty much the guy vanishes on her, like leaves her, because he can't stand the pressure of dealing with this woman with all of these children. And if you look at my last video, I'm literally showing y'all, like, a lot of people don't want to date a woman with like a lot of kids and no mate. It's kind of like you're taking on that burden. You know what I mean? She's trying to move on with her life after her husband is killed. You get what I'm saying? Put across train tracks. And so I just, that story, if you looked at my last video, that story was just sad. Like, and then you hear how heartbroken Malcolm was in the end of that chapter. Like, the government could have helped us. Like, he's like telling, like, the government, how can you put us in this situation and break us down, and then he was like going off at the end of this chapter of this book. Like, in the end of chapter 1 of this book, Malcolm is going to fuck off on just the system, like how they beat people down and don't help people up, and they ruin my family, they ruin my life. Like, he's just going off. So it's just like, it's such a crazy book. So I'm just like, I read this chapter before. I read half this book before. How was I not affected by it the way I am now? But I'm like, I'm 30 now, so I guess it just affects me different with more life experience, and you just feel different. It just hits different now that I'm older and I understand, and now I can just understand. It's like, the more wiser you are, the sadder you are, because you just know better. You know more. You feel more. And that chapter just blew me away, and I really just want to go into depth and give more context about the foundation of who Malcolm was. And I'm collecting all of the information I can on him and his parents and the making of the movie and all of that. And man, it's incredible. It's incredible, man. I'm collecting that information, and I want to make videos about it and just talk about it. And I will talk about this shit. The more information I get, and the more I build on this story, and the more I build on the timeline, I'm going to talk about this stuff for the rest of my life and carry this with me for the rest of my life, y'all. But that's all I wanted to say. This is just, first part of my journey of learning about this stuff and how it's just affected me in a way that I wasn't affected by when I first started getting into this book years ago. Like, years. I think I read half this book years ago. I know Malcolm's story. I know his story, not just from the movie, but I know his story. About him wearing a zoot suit and going to Boston and all of that. So I know, man. So, yeah, man. I'm just sharing the first part of the journey about it all. So, hopefully I can really bring this shit to life, man, the way I want to. Anyway, I'm out.